3:47 in the morning. Frost glitters across the Boston streets like broken glass scattered beneath dying streetlights, each flake catching the light and throwing it back into the darkness. The city sleeps. The underground does not. The kitchen door of the poker room swings open with a sound like a gunshot in the silence. Cassandra Morgan stumbles through it, and the world stops breathing. She is 27 years old but looking decades older, the kind of aging that comes not from time but from the weight of impossible choices stacked on top of each other until the spine begins to curve. Her blonde hair, once probably bright, is now a dull shade matted against her pale face with sweat and blood. Her waitress uniform hangs torn across her ribs, the fabric separated at the seam like a mouth screaming. Beneath her pressed fingers, a gash weeps red through crumpled white apron. Her orthopedic shoes, the kind worn by people who work 16-hour shifts, leave wet prints on the concrete floor as she moves forward. And in her right fist, clutched so tightly her knuckles have gone white, is $78 in crumpled bills. Every dollar she has left in the world. The room goes absolutely still. Cigar smoke hangs suspended in the air above 6 felt tables stacked with cash, thousands of dollars resting on the green felt like chips in a game where the stakes are measured in blood and broken families. 6 armed men in black suits, each one broad-shouldered and expensive, freeze mid-movement. Hands that were moving toward drinks stop halfway. Cards that were being dealt hang in fingers. Eyes that were calculating odds turn toward the bleeding woman in the torn uniform. The only sound is the soft hum of the ventilation system and her breathing, ragged and shallow. At the center table, Rafael Vitoli does not move. He is tall. Broad-shouldered in a way that suggests not gym work but the kind of physical strength that comes from survival. 49 years old, with dark hair silvered at the temples and a scar running from the outer corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, a map of something violent that happened a long time ago and never fully healed. His suit is charcoal gray, tailored to fit him like a second skin, worth more than this bleeding woman earns in 6 months of double shifts. His white shirt is open at the collar, revealing the chest of a man who does not fear anything anymore because there is nothing left to lose. On his left wrist, a gold watch ticks the seconds away. On his right hand, a silver ring engraved with symbols that mean loyalty or death or both. His dark eyes track Cassandra's movement across the concrete floor like a predator watching prey that has wandered into its territory. She does not recognize him. She has never seen Rafael Vitoli before. She does not know that he controls half of Boston from the shadows of this underground room, that his word is law in this city, that men have disappeared for less than looking at him the wrong way. She only knows that she is bleeding and desperate and out of options. She sways forward, her voice barely a whisper, trembling like a candle in the wind. "I need to find Tyler Brennan," she says. "He stole my tips. He stole money for weeks. He's the manager at Chen's diner upstairs and she stops. Blood drips from her fingers onto the concrete floor. Drop. 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 I have 10 days. I have 10 days to get $47,000 or my daughter dies." The words hang in the smoke like an accusation. Rafael's lieutenant Sergio, a man built like a wall with the face of someone who has seen every kind of cruelty, moves to intercept her. His hand reaches out. But Rafael raises his right hand, just slightly, and Sergio stops as if he has hit an invisible barrier. Cassandra continues forward. Her eyes are fixed on nothing, on no one, on the impossible math of 10 days and $47,000 and a daughter lying in a hospital bed with a hole in her heart. "I just helped some drunk man in the alley," she says. Behind the diner. 3 men were beating him. I stepped between them and the men and me. I stopped them. Her voice cracks. "I need my money. I need to find Tyler. He owes me and I need every dollar he stole from me." She sways. Her hand presses harder against the gash in her ribs. But she does not fall. What she does not know, what no one in this room knows except Rafael himself, is that the drunk man she defended was already protected. The drunk man was already under Rafael's watch. The security cameras mounted in that alley caught every moment of it. Rafael saw the entire encounter. He watched her step between the men with nothing but desperation and courage. He watched her defend someone she had never met, someone who meant nothing to her, because it was the right thing to do. And Rafael has not seen anyone act from principle in 17 years. His dark eyes move from her face to the blood dripping from her fingertips to the $78 clutched in her fist. His scar catches the light. For a moment, the room seems to hold its breath, waiting for the word that will determine whether she lives or dies, whether she bleeds out on this concrete floor or walks back out into the Boston night. Then he speaks. "Bring her to the office," he says. His voice is deep and solid like an oath, like something carved into stone. "And get a doctor." Sergio's eyes widen. In 15 years of working for Rafael Vitoli, he has never heard him speak those words. He has never seen the boss move toward anyone with anything that could be mistaken for mercy. But he moves now. He moves toward Cassandra with his hands open, non-threatening, speaking in a gentle voice that sounds strange coming from a man his size. "Come with me," Sergio says. "We will stop the bleeding." She lets him guide her away. Her eyes never find Rafael's. She does not know that he is still watching her, still calculating something in the darkness behind his eyes, still making a decision that will change everything. The poker game does not resume. The room remains in that strange suspended state, waiting for something none of them yet understand. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Every moment you spend with us means everything. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us rewind 18 hours, back to the start of the day when Cassandra's nightmare truly began. The alarm on her phone screams at 5:32 in the morning. Not 5:30. 5:32. Because the phone is old and the alarm is never quite accurate anymore. She wakes in darkness. The apartment is so cold she can see her own breath clouding the air in front of her face. The walls are thin, paper-thin really, and through them comes the sound of her neighbor arguing with someone, voices rising and falling like a tide. A baby cries 3 rooms away. The pipes rattle and groan as someone showers or fills a bathtub. Cassandra sits up slowly, moving carefully because every part of her body aches. Her back aches from the shift yesterday. Her feet ache from standing for 16 hours. Her hands hurt from washing dishes in scalding water. She is tired in the way that people are tired when they are running on fumes and the fumes are almost gone. She gets out of bed. The floor is cold against her feet. She walks to the window and looks out at Boston waking up. Snow fell sometime in the night, covering the streets in white, covering the evidence of yesterday's desperation with something almost beautiful. She walks to the dresser and picks up the envelope sitting there. Red ink. Printed officially. 12 days. That is what it says. 12 days until the eviction notice becomes real. In another room, Lily is still sleeping. Lily is 7 years old and the only reason Cassandra has not walked into the ocean. Lily's medical file sits on top of the refrigerator, and Cassandra has read it so many times she has the words memorized. Congenital heart defect. Require surgery. Time sensitive. Without intervention, prognosis is. She does not let herself finish that sentence. Instead, she counts the money in her wallet. $17. Bills she set aside from yesterday's tips that Tyler did not manage to steal, though not for lack of trying. $17 and 12 days and a daughter whose heart is dying inside her chest. The math is not complicated. It is just impossible. The snow outside the window of Murphy's diner had turned to slush by 9 in the morning, grey and dirty, reflecting nothing but the exhaustion of the city waking up. Cassandra Morgan stood at the counter wiping down the espresso machine, her waitress uniform wrinkled from the double shift she had worked the night before, the hem coming loose at the back where she had caught it on a chair weeks ago and never had time or money to fix it. Her dark hair, once rich brown, had faded to something closer to ash from the stress and the lack of proper nutrition, pulled back in a braid so tight it made her temples ache. Her eyes were the color of storm water, and right now they were fixed on the clock above the kitchen pass. 9:53 a.m. 20 minutes until the breakfast rush ended and the lunch crowd had not yet arrived. 20 minutes of relative quiet in a place that never stayed quiet for long. The diner smelled like it always did. Grease heavy in the air, the kind that clung to your clothes and your hair and your skin. Coffee that had been sitting in the pot since 6 in the morning, burnt at the bottom. Burned toast. The faint chemical smell of industrial cleaner that did nothing to mask the truth of the place, which was that Murphy's diner was dying. The vinyl booths were cracked and taped with duct tape in a dozen places. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered and hummed, one of them cycling on and off every few seconds like a broken heartbeat. The black and white checkered floor was worn through in high-traffic areas, showing the concrete underneath like exposed bone. 3 customers sat at the counter, nursing coffee and eggs, none of them looking at anything but their plates. Cassandra's feet hurt. They always hurt now. The pain had become so constant that she had stopped noticing it on a conscious level, the way you stop noticing background noise. But it was there, a dull throb in her arches and heels, radiating up through her ankles to her knees. She had been on her feet for 16 hours yesterday, and before that 14 hours the day before. The human body was not designed to sustain that kind of punishment, but the human body did not have a choice when the alternative was watching your daughter stop breathing. Through the kitchen window, she could see Marcus at the grill, flipping eggs and bacon with the kind of mechanical efficiency that came from doing the same motion 10,000 times. Marcus was 63 years old and he had been working at Murphy's for 19 years. He never spoke to Cassandra except to confirm orders. He did not look at her. Most people at Murphy's did not look at her anymore. She had become part of the background, like the broken tiles and the humming lights. The bell above the door chimed. She looked up automatically, the reflexive movement of a waitress trained to greet customers, and her entire body went rigid. Tyler Brennan was walking through the door, and even though he worked here, even though he managed the restaurant, seeing him always triggered something primal in her. A small animal sensing a predator. Tyler was 42 years old and he had the kind of face that might have been handsome once before the drinking and the cruelty had carved themselves into the skin around his eyes and mouth. His hair was thinning, combed over in a way that fooled nobody, and he had coffee stains on his white shirt from yesterday that he had not bothered to change out of. His breath, which he had smelled many times when he leaned close to her, always reeked of cigarettes and cheap whiskey. "Cassandra," he said, and his voice was the voice of a man who had already decided what he wanted. "Come here." She did not come. She set down the cloth she had been using to wipe the espresso machine and moved toward the kitchen instead, but he cut her off by moving behind the counter, blocking her path. The 3 customers did not look up from their plates. They had learned not to look. Tyler gestured toward the supply closet, the small room off the back where they kept paper towels and napkins and industrial-sized cans of vegetables. Cassandra's hands curled into fists at her sides, and then she uncurled them because her hands were shaking and she did not want him to see. The supply closet smelled like dust and cardboard. The light was a single bare bulb that cast everything in a yellow, sickly hue. Tyler stepped inside and pulled the door mostly closed behind them, leaving just enough gap that nobody could say they were alone, though of course they were alone in every way that mattered. His breath came at her in a wave, whiskey and cigarettes and something underneath that was just his particular stench. "Your register is short," he said. $40. "No, it is not," Cassandra said. Her voice came out steady, which was good. She had learned how to keep her voice steady. I counted twice. Every dollar is accounted for. "Short," he repeated, stepping closer. "You know what I think, Cassie? I think you are skimming. Taking money off the top. Trying to supplement that pitiful income because your daughter is such a burden. I have never stolen anything from this restaurant. Report me and you are finished here," he said, and now he was close enough that she could see the broken blood vessels in his nose. Who is going to hire a single mother with a sick kid? Think about that for a second. Think about what happens to your daughter when you are on the streets. Think about where a 7-year-old girl sleeps when her mother has no place to put her. Cassandra did not move. She did not speak. She did not cry. Crying was a luxury she could not afford. Instead, she felt something calcify inside her chest, something cold and hard and enduring. She reached into her apron pocket and withdrew 3 20s and a 10, because it was faster than fighting, and Tyler pocketed the cash with the satisfied expression of a man who had just proven something to himself. "You are a good girl," he said, and when he left the supply closet, Cassandra was alone with the cardboard boxes and the humming fluorescent light and the knowledge that she now had $78 to her name. $40 less than she had needed. $40 less than the impossible already was. The lunch crowd arrived at 11. The diner filled with noise and chaos, the sound of plates clinking, forks scraping, the espresso machine hissing steam. Cassandra moved through it all like a ghost, taking orders, delivering plates, collecting money that did not belong to her anymore. At 2 p.m., the door opened and Catherine Mercer walked in. Catherine was 38 years old and everything about her was expensive. Her coat was camel-colored wool that probably cost more than Cassandra earned in 2 months. Her hair was blonde and perfectly styled, swept back from a face that had been maintained by good genetics and better dermatologists. She wore a diamond ring that caught the light, throwing rainbow fractals across the diner walls. She was the ex-wife of Tyler, though they still owned the restaurant together, a fact that had never been fully explained to Cassandra. Catherine moved through the dining room like she owned it, which technically she did, and she pulled out a booth near the window and sat down. Cassandra brought her a menu, though Catherine waved it away without looking at Cassandra's face. "Coffee," Catherine said. "Black. And have them make sure the toast is not burned this time. The food in this place is embarrassing." When Cassandra returned with the coffee, Catherine was speaking to Tyler, who stood near the booth with his hands in his pockets. They had not been married for 4 years, but they had owned the diner together for 6. The mathematics of business rarely aligned with the mathematics of the heart. "Why do we keep hiring charity cases?" Catherine said, loud enough that 3 nearby tables could hear her, loud enough that Cassandra, setting down the coffee cup, could not miss the words. "Look at her. She looks like she has not slept in years. Bad for business. Customers come in here to escape their problems, not to have them reflected back in the face of some exhausted single mother with a dying child." The coffee cup clattered against the saucer. Cassandra did not know she had dropped it until she heard the sound. She bent to pick up the cup, keeping her eyes on the black liquid spreading across the white saucer, and when she straightened, her face was burning in a way that had nothing to do with the kitchen heat. "I will bring you another cup," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper, a sound like paper tearing. "Please do," Catherine said, and she turned back to Tyler as if Cassandra had ceased to exist. That night, Cassandra left her studio apartment at 6 in the evening after checking on Lily. Her daughter was sleeping in the small bedroom, her breathing the kind of breathing that was not quite right, shallow and slightly wheezing, the sound of a heart that was not pumping efficiently. The medication bottles lined the dresser like a pharmacy. Cassandra counted them, checking the quantities, calculating the days, doing the arithmetic in her head that always came out the same way. 10 days until the surgery, assuming it happened on time, assuming Catherine's words did not follow through on their implied threat to her employment, assuming so many things that could not be assumed. The medical file lay on top of the refrigerator, dog-eared and worn from reading. She had read it so many times she could recite it like a prayer. Congenital heart defect. Requires surgical intervention. Time-sensitive. Without treatment, prognosis is, she had trained herself not to finish that sentence. Instead, she took the envelope from the table, the one with the red ink and the official seal, and she read it one more time even though the words never changed. 12 days until eviction. 12 days until she and her daughter were homeless. 10 days until the surgery. 8 days between those 2 dates, which meant that if the surgery happened on time, they would be recovering in a hospital while their apartment was being given to the next person in line. The landlord did not care about surgical recovery. The landlord cared about rent, and rent was due. She had $78. The walk to Chen's restaurant took her through neighborhoods that were steadily getting less safe as the sun disappeared. The streets emptied out around her. The restaurants and shops gave way to closed storefronts with plywood over the windows. A siren wailed somewhere far away. The November wind cut through her thin coat like a blade wrapped in ice, and she thought about Catherine's words, about being a charity case, about being the kind of person that made other people uncomfortable just by existing. Chen's restaurant was a dim place on a corner 3 blocks from the waterfront. Most of its business came from the front, where they served dim sum and noodles and other dishes that required time and skill to prepare. The real money came from the back, from the basement, from the operation that existed in shadow and that required waitresses who did not ask questions and did not report anything to anyone. Tyler had given her the shift schedule 3 weeks ago. "You are going to work nights at Chen's," he had told her. "Serving drinks to some business associates of mine. You will be pleasant. You will be discreet. You will not ask questions about what you see or hear. If you do this without complaint, you can keep your position at the diner. If you refuse, I will fire you immediately and you will have nothing." She had no way to refuse. She took the job. Now she descended the concrete stairs at the back of the restaurant, passing through a kitchen where 3 cooks worked in efficient silence, and then down another set of stairs into the basement. The poker room was a revelation every time she entered it, a place that seemed to exist in direct contradiction to everything that happened in the rest of the city. The lighting was low and amber, coming from brass fixtures on the walls. The air was thick with cigar smoke. A mahogany bar ran along one wall, stocked with bottles that cost more than Cassandra's monthly rent. 6 tables were set up with poker chips and cards, and at those tables sat men in suits, expensive suits, the kind that made the ones Tyler wore look like costume jewelry. And at one of those tables, watching the cards the way a hunter watches prey, sat a man who seemed to pull all the light in the room toward himself. The winter air bit like teeth as Cassandra Morgan stepped through the kitchen door of Chen's restaurant at 3:15 in the morning. 19 degrees. The kind of cold that made breath visible, that turned the world sharp and clear and crystalline. Stars hung overhead like diamonds cut into a black sky, and frost coated every surface with a layer of sugar glass so delicate it crunched under her worn-through shoes. She had been inside for 6 hours. 6 hours of carrying drinks down concrete stairs into a basement that smelled of cigar smoke and leather and something else, something darker. Her feet ached. Her lower back screamed. The cut on her ribs from the broken glass at the diner 2 days ago throbbed in the cold. The alley behind the restaurant was narrow, brick walls on both sides, dumpsters overflowing with the day's waste. She was halfway to the street when she heard it. A sound that stopped her mid-step. Grunting. A body hitting metal. Someone begging in words too slurred to understand. 3 men stood around a figure collapsed against the dumpster. Leather jackets. Shaved heads. Fists clenched. Blood darkened the stranger's face, and one of the men raised a crowbar high, moonlight catching its edge. Cassandra's feet moved before her mind caught up. "Stop," she said. Her voice barely above a whisper, but it cut through the frozen air like a blade. "Leave him alone." The men turned. The one with the crowbar smiled. Not a smile meant for smiling. A smile meant for tearing things apart. "Walk away, waitress," he said. His accent thick. Eastern European. "This is not your business." She planted her feet. Felt her heartbeat in her throat, in her fingertips, in the cut that suddenly burned hot against her ribs. "I said leave him alone." The man in the center stepped toward her. His breath came out in white clouds. He was broad across the shoulders, his knuckles scarred from a lifetime of hitting things that did not deserve hitting. He reached out and shoved her backward. She stumbled. Her back hit the brick wall hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. But she did not fall. She pushed off the wall and stepped forward again, planting herself directly between the men and the stranger. Something moved in the darkness. Shadows became men, became silhouettes, became 2 figures who emerged from the space between buildings like ghosts who had learned how to hold guns. The man on the left was broad-shouldered and scarred down his left cheekbone. The man on the right was leaner, but his eyes held the kind of stillness that came from killing without hesitation. Guns were drawn. The 3 attackers ran. Not walked. Ran. Their footsteps echoed off the brick walls and then faded into the Boston night, leaving only the sound of their retreat and the hard breathing of everyone remaining. Cassandra's knees buckled. She caught herself against the dumpster. The scarred man spoke into a radio clipped to his jacket. "Target secure." Woman interfered. His voice was deep and rough like gravel. He looked at her with an expression that could not be read. "You need to leave." "He is hurt," Cassandra said. She moved toward the stranger, trying to help him to his feet. Her hand shook. Everything shook. "We need to call an ambulance." "That is not necessary," the scarred man said. But the other attacker was coming back. He emerged from the shadows with a knife that caught the starlight like something alive. The blade swung toward the stranger, toward Cassandra, who was still bent over trying to help. She saw it coming in slow motion. Time stretched. The knife was a line of silver moving through the frozen air. It caught her across the ribs, above the old wound, a new burn of pain that made her gasp and stumble backward. Her hand flew to her side. Fingers came away wet and dark in the moonlight. "Go," the scarred man said. Not to the attacker. To her. Cassandra did not go. She staggered back through the kitchen door instead, her hand pressed against the bleeding gash, her mind on one thing only. Tyler. Tyler Brennan. The manager who had given her the shift at this place. The man who still owed her $340 from stolen tips. The man whose name had appeared on the eviction notice taped to her apartment door in red ink, 12 days remaining before legal proceedings. She descended the concrete stairs. Passed through the kitchen where the three cooks did not look up from their work. Descended another set of stairs. The poker room swallowed her like a mouth. The amber lighting made everything seem carved from gold. Cigar smoke hung in layers like the atmosphere of another planet. The mahogany bar gleamed. At 6 different tables, men in suits played cards. Expensive suits. The kind that cost more than everything Cassandra had ever owned, including her daughter. And at one table, a man looked up from his hand. He was tall. Easily 6'2", maybe more. Built like someone who had been formed from consequence and shadow. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so precisely it seemed part of his body. A white shirt lay open at the collar, revealing a chest marked with a scar that ran from his collarbone toward his heart like a line of fate. His hair was dark, silvered at the temples. His eyes were the color of a winter storm, all gray and cold and holding the weight of things he had decided and could not take back. Rafael Vitoli. She did not know his name yet. But she would remember his face for the rest of her life. He watched her cross the poker room, trailing blood across the amber lighting like a thread leading somewhere terrible. His men froze. Not visibly. Not with any obvious movement. But the air changed. The temperature shifted. The smoke hung differently in the space where he sat today. He set down his cards. Slowly, he stood. The other players looked away. 2 of them folded their hands. One of them pretended to study his chips with sudden intense interest. The whole room understood that something had shifted, something fundamental, something that could not be shifted back. Rafael gestured to one of his men. The scarred one. "Sergio." "Bring her here," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Like the kind of words that, once spoken, could never be unsaid. Cassandra tried to walk past. Sergio stepped into her path, not touching her, just standing there, a wall in an expensive suit. She did not have the strength to argue. She had been awake for 32 hours. She had worked 3 jobs in 1 week. She had $78 to her name and 12 days before the city swallowed her and her daughter whole. She followed Sergio to the table. "Sit," Rafael said. "I need to find Tyler Brennan," she said. Her voice came out fractured, like something that had broken and was being held together by will alone. "He manages Murphy's Diner. He stole $340 from my tips this month. I need that money. My daughter Lily is 5 years old. She has a congenital heart condition. She needs surgery in 10 days or her heart will simply stop. The surgery costs $47,000. I have $78. I just need what he stole. That is all. She held up the bills. Crumpled. Worn. The entire sum of her existence reduced to something you could hold in one trembling hand. Rafael studied her the way a hunter studies wounded prey. His hands moved. It was the first time she had ever seen him display anything resembling uncertainty. He gestured to another man, Pietro, lean and quiet, who disappeared and returned with a first aid kit. Rafael opened it himself. In 15 years, Marco had never seen him do this. In 15 years, he had never seen him stand for a woman who was not on his payroll. He had never seen him approach anyone like you approach a wounded animal, slow and measured and careful not to startle. He had never seen him take a bandage in his hands and clean blood that was not his own. "Let me see," Rafael said. She flinched. But she was too tired to resist. She lifted her shirt slightly. The gash was deep. Not life-threatening but close. The blood had soaked through her coat and the thin fabric beneath. He cleaned it with steady hands. Applied butterfly bandages. The smell of antiseptic rose between them like a prayer neither of them was saying. "When is the surgery?" he asked. 10 days, she whispered. December 16th. Boston Children's Hospital. They will not operate without the full balance. He nodded slowly, his gray eyes holding something she could not name. "Go home," he said. "Rest. I will handle Tyler Brennan." "I do not need charity," she said, and there was iron in it, even broken as she was. "I need what I earned." He met her eyes. "You saved a man tonight. Consider this payment." She did not believe him. But she was too weak to argue. Sergio drove her home in a black SUV that smelled like leather and power. She fell asleep in the back seat and woke in front of her apartment building, which was held together by prayer and duct tape and the sheer stubbornness of people with nowhere else to go. 3 days later, an envelope appeared under her apron at Murphy's Diner. $500 in cash. A note in handwriting precise as a blade, for Lily. More coming. Tyler found her holding it. "Where did you get that?" His voice was sharp, dangerous, the voice of a man who had spent his life taking what belonged to other people. "You stealing from customers now?" He reached for the envelope. She pulled away. "Someone gave it to me. For my daughter." "Nobody gives you anything," Tyler said. His face darkened. "You're lying." Catherine Mercer emerged from the kitchen at that exact moment. She was 48 years old but maintained the kind of beauty that came from money and cruelty applied in equal measure. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it stretched her face into something resembling a smile. "Cassandra," she said, and her voice was sugar-coating poison. "We need to talk about your performance. Several customers have complained about you. Begging for tips. Telling sob stories. We cannot have that here." "I have never begged," Cassandra said. "Nevertheless," Catherine said, "we are cutting your hours. 2 shifts per week instead of 6. The room tilted. "I need those hours," Cassandra said. "My daughter." "Not my problem," Catherine interrupted. Her smile widened. "Maybe if you focused on work instead of sob stories, you would still have a job." What neither of them knew was that Pietro sat in a booth 20 feet away, recording every word on his phone. The audio would be saved, preserved, prepared like evidence waiting for the moment it would be needed. Over the next 3 weeks, more envelopes appeared. $1,000. $1,500. A lawyer called her apartment. The eviction had been dismissed due to clerical error. Rent had been paid for 6 months. Then Boston Children's Hospital called. "Ms. Morgan? Your daughter's surgery has been fully paid by an anonymous donor. We are scheduled for December 16th. Please come in for pre-op tomorrow at 10. Cassandra had to sit down. Her legs simply stopped supporting her. She wept on the phone, unable to comprehend that the universe could be this kind, this gentle, this merciful. She returned to Chen's restaurant one night and asked for the man from the poker room. The staff claimed not to know who she meant. So she left a note on the bar, "Thank you. I do not know why you helped me, but I will pay you back every dollar." Cassandra Morgan. Rafael received it in the doorway of his penthouse nursery, standing in the space where his daughter Mina's crib had once been. The toys still sat exactly where she had left them 17 years ago. A stuffed rabbit. Building blocks. A music box that no one had wound since the day she died. He did not respond to the note. But he had been watching Cassandra Morgan for 3 weeks. Watching her work herself to exhaustion. Watching her refuse to give up. Watching her stand between armed men and a stranger without hesitation. Something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest. Something that felt like mercy. Something that felt like redemption. Something that felt like a second chance at being human. Word count, 1989. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's Diner hummed their tired song as Cassandra wiped down the counter at 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday. The lunch crowd had thinned to scattered tables, businessmen on laptops, an elderly couple sharing a milkshake, a mother with 2 young children coloring on paper napkins. Cassandra moved between them like a ghost, her movements automatic after so many months of double shifts, her mind half present, half lost in calculations about Lily's post-surgery physical therapy costs. Tyler Brennan stood in the kitchen doorway, Catherine Mercer beside him, both dressed in clothes that cost more than Cassandra's monthly rent. Catherine's diamond earrings caught the fluorescent light and threw it back in sharp angles. Tyler's smile was the smile of a man about to strike. "Cassandra!" His voice cut through the diner's ambient noise. Customers turned. "We need to discuss something. Here. Now." Her stomach clenched. She set down the coffee pot she had been holding. "The register is short $3,000, Tyler announced, loud enough for every customer to hear. "Over the past 2 months. 3,000 missing." The mother with the 2 children looked up from her plate. The elderly man folded his newspaper. Silence spread like spilled milk across the diner's worn linoleum. "I never took anything," Cassandra said. Her voice sounded small. It sounded breakable. "I would never." "We understand," Catherine interrupted, her voice dripping false concern like poison in honey. She stepped closer, close enough that Cassandra could smell her perfume, expensive and suffocating. "Your daughter's surgery. We know how much money you needed. The pressure you were under. We understand the desperation." "I didn't steal," Cassandra repeated, but her hands were shaking now. Around her, customers were watching. Recording on phones. The moment was becoming permanent, becoming evidence, becoming the story that would follow her forever. Tyler produced a manila folder from behind his back. Inside were register receipts, printed and dated, showing Cassandra's initials authorizing cash withdrawals that never happened. The dates were perfect. The amounts were specific. The documentation was flawless. Completely false. Completely damning. "We can handle this quietly," Tyler said, his voice gentle now, almost kind, which was worse than cruelty. "Confess now, and we won't press charges with the police. This stays between us." "But if you deny it," Catherine added, her eyes glittering like broken glass, "we will have no choice but to contact law enforcement. In front of your daughter's school. In front of her daycare provider. I imagine social services will want to investigate whether someone with a criminal record should have custody." The threat hung in the air like a blade. Cassandra understood in that moment what they were really saying: admit to a crime she did not commit, lose her dignity, or maintain her innocence and lose her daughter. "I did not steal," she whispered. "Someone help me. Someone anonymous. I don't know who, but I did not steal." Catherine sighed, the sound of an actress performing for an audience. She turned to the watching customers, her hands spread open in a gesture of helplessness. Denial will only make this worse. We have evidence. We have documentation. We wanted to protect her, but she won't let us. A customer in the corner booth pulled out his phone and dialed. Cassandra heard him say, "Yeah, I'm reporting a situation at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. Possible employee theft." She stood absolutely still. Around her, the diner continued its ordinary movements, coffee poured into cups, eggs sizzled on the griddle, a child laughed at something her mother said. The world did not stop. The world did not care. The world just kept turning while her life collapsed in real time. That night at 11 o'clock, Cassandra sat on the metal grating of the fire escape outside her apartment. The December air was sharp and clear, frost glittering on the metal like diamonds scattered by an indifferent god. Through the window behind her, she could see her daughter sleeping, bundled under the quilt that Cassandra had sewn from fabric scraps, safe and warm and alive because a stranger had chosen mercy. But Cassandra was shaking, not from cold. From the weight of months of abuse, years of being crushed under cruelty, the accumulation of every small humiliation and every injustice she had absorbed without breaking. Her hands trembled as she held the falsified receipts Tyler had given her, proof of theft she never committed, proof that would be enough to destroy her in the eyes of the law, the eyes of social services, the eyes of everyone who mattered. Tomorrow Catherine planned to call the police. Officers would arrive at Murphy's Diner, or worse, at Lily's school. Cassandra would be arrested in front of customers, in front of the daycare provider who already doubted her stability, in front of her daughter's classmates. She would lose custody. The state would take Lily. Everything she had fought for, the surgery, the recovery, the second chance at being a family, would be gone, erased, rendered meaningless. The stars overhead were sharp and cold and indifferent. She thought about how easy it would be to simply disappear. To let someone else take care of Lily, someone stronger, someone not broken by exhaustion and desperation and the relentless weight of survival. Her fingers were numb from the cold. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine the escape. Then from inside the apartment, Lily coughed in her sleep. A small sound. A child's breathing, steady and healthy now. The kind of sound that only existed because Cassandra had refused to give up when giving up would have been so much easier. She opened her eyes. She stood up. The frost cracked under her feet as she moved toward the window, watching her daughter sleep. No. She would not let them win. She would not let them take this from her. What she did not know, what no one in that diner knew, what Tyler and Catherine could not have anticipated, was that Rafael Vitoli had known about their plan for 3 days. He had been waiting. Watching. Calculating the perfect moment for the dismantling to begin. The next evening, Catherine Mercer stood at a microphone in the Copley Plaza Hotel's Grand Ballroom, wearing a dress that cost more than a used car, her diamonds catching the light as she spoke about generosity and compassion and the importance of giving back to those less fortunate. Behind her, a banner read, "The Mercer Foundation for Underprivileged Children." The irony was not lost on Rafael Vitoli as he stood in his penthouse 30 blocks away, watching the live broadcast on multiple screens, his expression carved from stone. At exactly 8:41 p.m., as Catherine reached the climax of her speech, as the ballroom applauded and cameras panned across the assembled wealth of Boston's elite, every screen in the room flickered simultaneously. The feed from the charity broadcast cut to security footage from Murphy's Diner. Tyler Brennan, on video, reaching into Cassandra's apron pocket and removing bills. Tyler's voice, clear and unmistakable, "She'll never know. Nobody counts the tips." More footage, Catherine at the restaurant office, her voice cold as marble, "That charity case doesn't need the money anyway. I need it for my investment portfolio." Hours of footage. Days of recordings. Audio of Catherine calling Cassandra's trash and charity case and the kind of woman who drags down better people. Bank records, spreadsheet after spreadsheet, documenting 10 years of systematic theft from employees. The total, $47,000 stolen from working people who could not afford to lose a single dollar. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Cameras captured Catherine's face as the color drained from it, as her smile froze and shattered, as she realized that the image she had spent decades constructing was being dismantled in real time in front of 200,000 live viewers. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Within minutes, the footage had gone viral. Within the hour, every news outlet in Boston was running the story. By midnight, it had spread across the country. Social media burned with it. Tyler's phone rang. Police had issued a warrant for his arrest. Catherine's phone exploded with messages, her investors pulling funding, her board members demanding resignation, her society friends blocking her numbers. At dawn, federal investigators arrived at Murphy's diner with a warrant. Tyler Brennan was arrested in front of the breakfast crowd, handcuffed, his composed businessman's facade shattering as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. He was shaking, pale, trembling like a cornered animal begging for mercy that would never come. 8 to 12 years. Federal prison. Wire fraud, wage theft, extortion of an employee. Catherine's arrest happened at her townhouse at 7 in the morning. FBI agents at her door, neighbors watching from their windows, her reputation disintegrating with each photograph the news cameras captured. Her assets were frozen. Her connections severed. Her own allies, the people she had called friends for decades, abandoned her as the evidence spread. 6 to 10 years. Federal prison. Conspiracy, fraud, racketeering. Justice was not death. Death would have been too quick, too easy, too merciful. Justice was the complete systematic dismantling of everything they had built on the suffering of others. Justice was watching them fall from the heights they had never earned. Cassandra learned about the arrests on the morning news. She sat in her apartment at 6 in the morning, coffee growing cold in her hands, watching her former employers being led away in handcuffs, watching their faces on screens across the city, watching their fall happen in real time. She did not know who had exposed them. She could not comprehend how this had happened. But she knew who to thank. She knew it in her bones, in the strange precision of the timing, in the way the evidence had surfaced the moment before her own destruction. Someone had been watching. Someone had been protecting her without asking for anything in return. She sat very still, her daughter still asleep, the morning light just beginning to touch the edge of the fire escape. The sun rose over Boston like a new beginning. And for the first time in months, Cassandra Morgan could breathe. The underground poker room was empty except for 2 people. A woman in a simple dark dress stood in the doorway, the same doorway where she had bled months ago, her ribs screaming, her daughter's surgery hanging over her head like a curse she could not escape. Rafael Vitoli sat at the center felt table, the same table where he had watched her that first night, where his entire world had shifted on its axis without his permission. No bodyguards. No weapons visible. Just a man in a black suit and a woman who had changed everything. She moved forward slowly, each step deliberate, her shoes echoing against the black and white checkered floor like a clock counting seconds toward something inevitable. The November cold still clung to her coat, but inside the room, the air was warm, thick with anticipation, like the moment before lightning strikes. "You are the one who helped me," Cassandra said. Not a question. A statement. Her voice carried steel now, months of rebuilding herself evident in every word. She was not the desperate woman from that first night. She was someone else. Someone stronger. Rafael nodded, a single gesture that held 17 years of longing, of watching people suffer while he built an empire that meant nothing, that protected nothing that mattered. "Why?" she asked. The word hung between them like a blade. He gestured to the chair across from him. "This time, she Saturday. You stood between armed men and a stranger," Rafael said, his voice quiet, deeper than the sound of the rain that had begun to fall outside, rain hitting the windows like urgent fingers begging to be let in. "You asked for nothing but what you were owed. You did not beg. You did not break." She listened, her eyes fixed on his face, searching for the answer she needed to hear. 17 years ago, my daughter died while I was building this empire, he continued. His hands were steady on the table, but his eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes, glistened like the streets of Boston after a storm. Her name was Mina. She was 4 years old. Her nursery is still untouched in my penthouse because I cannot bear to erase her. The toys she never reached for. The clothes she never wore. The life she never lived. Cassandra's breath caught. She thought of Lily, sleeping at home, her chest rising and falling with the easy rhythm of a child who no longer feared tomorrow. Her eyes filled with tears. I saw my daughter in yours, Rafael said. I saw the mother I failed to be there for in you. You saved a man that night in the alley. But you saved me first, before you ever knew my name. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so human, so vulnerable, that for a moment Rafael looked away. Marco and Enzo had waited outside for 3 hours, guarding the door, guarding their boss who sat across from a waitress like she was royalty, like she was the most dangerous person in the room, which, Rafael understood now, she was. She had disarmed him without weapons, without even trying. You gave me everything, Cassandra whispered. I have nothing to offer you. You already gave me something I thought I had lost, he replied, his gaze returning to hers. You reminded me what it means to protect someone without expecting anything in return. You reminded me of the man I was before I became this. He gestured to the room around them, the empire, the darkness, the weight of 15 years of choices that had isolated him from everything that breathed. She stared at him, understanding dawning across her face like sunrise over water. I do not want your gratitude, Cassandra, he said. I want your partnership. I own 15 businesses in Boston. They need someone who understands what it means to work, to struggle, to fight for every dollar. Someone honest. Someone like you. You want me to work for you, she asked. I want you to stand beside me as an equal. Someone I trust. Someone who has already proven they would risk everything for a stranger. The confession was not desperate. It was recognition. The simplest, most devastating form of truth. She had not saved him because he was powerful. He had saved her because she was worth saving. Somewhere in the mathematics of that exchange, they had become equals, regardless of the money in his account or the power in his name. Over the following weeks, Cassandra worked with Rafael across his businesses. She brought insight he had never considered, challenging his assumptions, forcing him to see the people his empire overlooked. A cafe owner struggling with rent. A cleaning crew paid in cash under the table. A woman working double shifts to keep her daughter fed. Rafael had never noticed these people before. Cassandra made it impossible for him to ignore them. Sergio and Pietro watched in amazement as their boss listened to her, valued her opinion, smiled at her observations. One afternoon, as Cassandra suggested restructuring the cafe's profit-sharing model, Sergio leaned toward Pietro and whispered, "In 15 years, I have never seen him like this." One night, standing in the empty cafe after closing, the espresso machine still ticking as it cooled, Rafael told her, "You changed my life the moment you stumbled through that door bleeding and refusing to beg. I have spent 17 years building walls. You walked through them without even trying." She touched his hand, her fingers tracing the edge of his palm, a gesture so simple it shattered something in his chest. "You gave me back my daughter's future," Cassandra said. "That is a debt I can never repay." "It is not a debt," he replied. "It is a gift. One person to another. One parent to another." The romance bloomed slowly, like a flower pushing through concrete. It was built on months of trust, respect, and the profound recognition that they were equals despite their different worlds. He had money and power. She had courage and heart. Together, they were something neither of them could be alone. Then came the night when Rafael took her to his penthouse. They stood in a doorway on the 42nd floor, and he led her to a room she had not seen before. The nursery. Toys arranged on shelves. A crib with sheets that had never held a child's weight. A mobile of small birds that had never spun to soothe a sleeping infant. The air inside the room was cold, untouched, like a tomb. "Mina's room," he said softly. Cassandra walked to the window and looked out at Boston spread below them, millions of lights, millions of lives, all of them continuing forward, all of them unaware of the grief contained in this single, perfect, devastating room. "Help me let her go," Rafael whispered. "Help me open this room to the light again." Cassandra turned and looked at him. This man made of stone and shadows, asking permission to grieve, asking her to witness his shattering. She moved toward him and did something she had never done before. She held him. His arms wrapped around her, and for the first time in 17 years, Rafael Vitoli wept. Not quietly. Not contained. But fully, completely, like a man whose dam had finally broken, like a man learning that survival and healing were not the same thing. "We will help her," Cassandra said. "We will help Mina live by letting what we build here honor her memory." That was the moment they became not just partners, but something deeper. Something that had no name because names were too small for what they had become to each other. 6 months later, spring had returned to Boston. The cherry blossoms exploded across the city in shades of pink and white, painting the world in softness and renewal. Lily ran through the Boston Common, her laughter ringing out like bells, her body strong and healthy, her heart repaired by surgeons and saved by a man who had chosen to care. Cassandra watched from a bench, Rafael beside her, his hand resting on hers. Sergio and Pietro stood at a respectful distance, both smiling at the sight of their boss, genuinely happy, truly alive, for the first time in the years they had known him. 6 months ago, I had $78 and 10 days to save my daughter, Cassandra said, her voice steady, reflective. I thought my life was over. 6 months ago, I was a man who had forgotten why he built his empire, Rafael replied. You reminded me. She looked at him, this man who had saved her without knowing her, who had recognized himself in her struggle, who had chosen to become something better because she showed him how. I still do not understand why you helped me, she said. I was nobody. He took her hand, brought it to his lips, and pressed a kiss there that felt like a promise, like a prayer, like a vow. You were never nobody. You were a mother willing to die for her child. You were a woman who stood against armed men for a stranger. You were everything I had forgotten to value. The camera pulled back slowly, showing them together on the bench, Lily playing in the distance, the city of Boston stretching behind them, the same city that had been their battleground and would now be their home. Sometimes the people we save end up saving us. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. Not because of money or power, but because someone saw worth in us when we could not see it ourselves. Not because of who we are, but because of who we choose to become when given the chance to care. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that their worth is not measured by their bank account or their job title. Drop a like, subscribe, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand up when everyone expects you to fall. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you in the next story. Goodbye.